Bayside peeps. It's your friendly neighborhood yoga person. It can be an addition to the first video. If you need a little bit of a warm-up, I would recommend doing some of the first video, and then if you want to do a little bit more, come to this video afterwards. You don't have to do the whole other one. You could do like 10 minutes of the first one and then come to this one to do some new stuff. It won't be new to you, but it will be different from the other video, and maybe slightly more challenging. So here we go. Start in your seated position. When you're seated, the main thing is that you want to be able to have your hips perpendicular to the floor, meaning away from the tailbone, so that your spine is neutral and your shoulders are relaxed, and you can reach out through the top of the head. And it's a little bit of work and intention, but it's not struggle. If it is struggle, then sit in a chair, or the higher you elevate your seat, the easier it is to sit up straight. But you could use a low pillow if you just need a little bit of support, and then you can sit however your legs are most comfortable. It doesn't matter if your ankles are crossed, the soles of your feet are together, you're sitting on your shins, you have one leg straight out to the side because your knee hurts, just whatever works. Lay your eyes closed and tap into the natural rhythm of your breath. Give yourself a chance to take a longer inhale and a longer exhale. And as you're doing so, notice that there's an inherent rising and expansion associated with your inhale, and a releasing or a letting go or a downward energy associated with your exhale. So there's kind of like a rising and a falling of the breath. A lot of times I call this the ebb and flow of your breath. Get really comfortable with the natural ebb and flow of your breath as you're trying to take a slower breath. Whenever you feel ready to stretch forward over your legs, bring your hands forward, and you can switch up your legs if you want. Bring your hands forward and start to rest down over your legs. As you rest down over your legs, avoid lifting your hips yet. Also avoid trying too hard. So intending to actually relax. Maybe you're resting your head on your hands. Maybe your arms are out straight. Maybe you're still up on your hands or your forearms. Doesn't matter. It does matter to you how it feels on the inside. Your head could be lifted or lowered. If it feels natural for you to lift your hips and end up in a child's pose, you'll uncross the ankles and sit either between or on top of the heels. The arms can be anywhere you like. Elbows out to the side, resting the head on the hands is a good one. Stretching arms forward, bending elbows onto the shoulders is another good one. Taking arms back behind you, letting shoulders roll forward is a nice one if the hips are pretty low. Checking in with the rhythm of your breath, making sure you can still get a longer, slower, more rhythmic breath than you normally would. If you lose the breath at any time, just remember to come back, because making that pathway back to the breath is pretty much the practice of presence. So it's a good practice. So we'll come to a tabletop position and do arm circles, and we're going to do backward arm circles today. So you're going to take the right arm, your spine is in neutral, your core is strong, your head is in a comfortable position, and take the right arm, sweep it back, lift it up, and try to follow it with your gaze forward and around. Bypass tabletop and go back, forward, up, forward, and around. Left side, back, up, forward, and around, back, up, forward, and around, back to tabletop. From your tabletop position, walk your feet back or your knees back so you're in a plank. It could be a plank on the knees or the forearms if your wrists aren't ready for this. And when you lower down, you can lower down your legs first, or you can lower down like you're doing a push-up to the floor. Once you're down, come up onto your forearms, lift the chest, press the shoulders down, look to the right, maybe reach to the right with the left arm. You can do it on the floor as well. Inhale back to the center, lean to the left, maybe reach to the left. Inhale back to center, keeping the shoulders down, lifting the heart up, press into your forearms, bring the knees, curl them back into your child's pose position, knees closer together or farther apart. Come back to a tabletop position. From your tabletop position, either flexion extension by moving with the breath, exhale into flexion, inhale into extension. You can keep on doing this back and forth, or we can do tabletop from a neutral spine into downward facing dog, keeping the knees bent so you can press the chest back towards the thighs and drop the head. Inhale, tabletop. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale, tabletop. Exhale, downward facing dog, or holding your downward facing dog and bending one knee at a time. We want to keep pressing the chest back towards the thighs, so try not to let your chest start migrating forward. You can also try to straighten out both legs if it feels like a good time for that. Makes it a little harder for the hamstrings. If you find yourself getting pushed over your wrists, bend your knees so you can keep your chest back towards your thighs. Then come back to your tabletop. From your tabletop position, see if it's possible to take your right foot forward on the outside of your right leg. So my right knee is right outside my right shoulder. My left knee is where it is, and that's keeping my hips up. But if I take my left knee back, that's going to drop the hips and I'm going to get a little bit more stretch on the front of my left hip. So you can also shine your heart forward, press your shoulders down, and lift the chin off of the chest. So we're getting a little extension here. If you are very flexible, you can come down onto your left arm and maybe your right arm. If you know that you're not that flexible and you want to be able to walk later, don't do that. Stay up on the hands. And you can even have blocks underneath your hands if you like. We're kind of in a low lizard stretch. And then we'll come back to a child's pose briefly. And in your child's pose, arrange so that you're very comfortable and you can get some smooth, calm breaths. And then come back to your tabletop position. And we're going to step the left foot to the outside of the left hand. My knee is going to be bent right next to my shoulder, and I can maybe slide the right leg back and lift the heart. So if I keep the knee where it is, I don't have to stretch the front of my right thigh as much, but taking the knee back, making sure you have adequate padding like I have, is going to cause that front of the right hip to have to stretch a little bit more. Everything's going to get a little bit harder the lower you get, so you could try coming down onto your right forearm, maybe your left forearm. If you know that's going to be a bad idea, don't do it. It usually happens over time. Give yourself the support you need so you can get a smooth, calm breath. The heart is lifted, the shoulders are down. Embracing stillness, coming back to breath. We'll return to child's pose, sliding that left leg back. I'm going to do a child's pose with my toes tucked under for a little foot stretch. I'm also going to do the child's pose with my hands together, pointing towards the sky. And then we're going to come back to tabletop position. So from tabletop position, find your neutral spine. So you're not trying to change the curves of your spine at all. And from there, come into a downward facing dog, either with your knees bent or straight, or a combination of bent and straight. If you're new to downward facing dog and it feels very difficult to hold for this time period, you can also come in and out of it by coming down to a tabletop position. So the important thing is that you can breathe through all of these movements. We're eventually going to come back to a plank position. So if you're in a downward facing dog, you can slide your feet back, take your shoulders over your wrists, and you're in a plank, or a plank on the knees, or a forearm plank. Take an inhale here. Take an exhale, lower down to the floor. Either inhale up onto your forearms like we did before, or take your hands underneath your shoulders and lift up a little higher. Adjust your shoulders from up to down. Lift the heart, maybe lift the chin off the chest, and exhale back to your child's pose. Take a few slow breaths in your child's pose. Come back to tabletop. And from your tabletop position, with your knees underneath your hips, your toes tucked under, slide your right foot forward to the outside of your right hand. And this time, if you like, take your left knee up off the floor. If your hips end up, walk your left foot back a little bit so that it feels like your hips are in line with the shoulders, in line with the back of the head. So we're in a little bit of a lifted plank here, and you can hold here and breathe, or take the right hand to the right knee, or lift the right hand to the sky. So this is going to be more work if your knee is off the floor, and more stretch if your knee is on the floor. If you really like that stretch, bend your knee, reach back, and hold on to your foot. If you know this is going to prevent you from engaging in your life today, then don't do it and leave it maybe for another day. I don't want you to be overstretched. We're going to inhale, take the foot back down to the floor and the arm back down to the floor. Lift that back knee up off the floor with the option to come to plank here. You can also go to child's pose instead and spend a few breaths there. From your plank, exhale, lower down onto the floor. Inhale into the extension that's working best for you. Exhale back to your child's pose. Take a few calm breaths in your child's pose. Remember, the point is to basically monitor the breath, to keep the breath in mind. So whatever you're doing with your body is kind of secondary. The most important thing that you're doing is arranging yourself so that you can breathe and be present with your breath. So take modifications if needed. We're coming for your breath. We're coming back to tabletop. From tabletop, we're sliding the left leg forward. So the knee is right outside the shoulder. And then we are tucking the back toes under and lifting that right knee up off the floor. You can keep it down if you want. This is just a slightly different variation, but either works. Staying here, or taking your left hand onto your left knee and maybe reaching the left arm up to the sky. As an alternative, so this is going to require more work and strength. Having your right knee down on the floor is going to be a little more stretch. Bending that knee and holding onto the foot is also going to be a little bit more stretch. Just be aware of how much pressure you're putting onto your supporting wrist, and adjust onto your fingertips or your fist if you need to. Or back your shoulder up a little bit from over the wrist. Exhaling back into that original lunge. Feet are back on the floor, back foot's on the floor. We're tucking under to lift the leg, and then you can come back to plank and lower down, or you could decide to rest in a child's pose. Come into the extension that feels best for you. And then we're back in child's pose. Take a few slow, calm breaths there. And then we're going to meet in a downward facing dog. So you'll come to your tabletop position, toes are tucked under, spine is engaged, core is engaged, shoulders are strong, wrists are feeling up for it. Either go back and forth between tabletop and downward facing dog, or come to your downward facing dog, and you can bend one knee at a time. Or you can straighten both knees. Or, as said before, you could be going back and forth between tabletop and downward facing dog for another breath. And then we're going to come back down onto the knees. From this kneeling position and tabletop position, take your right leg out to the side. So you're going to have your right leg out to the side. Hopefully it's not slippery. So you want to make sure that it doesn't feel slippery at all. And rock back and forth, moving all the way back to the hips and all the way forward over the wrists. You can also be on your fists, or you can be on your forearms. This makes it a little bit harder. It's going to be a stretch on your right inner thigh. You can keep on doing this or come up into a kneeling position here. And you want to make sure that you have some bolster up underneath your standing knee. So here we're going to lift the toes up towards the sky, reach the arms straight out from the shoulders, and exhale into sort of like a kneeling triangle position with the left arm up and over the cheek or straight up to the sky. Put your gazing point wherever your neck feels best. Keep the breath calm and smooth. Inhale, come back up. Bring the hands forward so you're in a tabletop position again. Drop the toes to the floor and then set yourself back in a child's pose. And if you would rather do a tabletop or a downward facing dog, do that instead. Then we'll do the other side. So you're going to come back into your tabletop position, set it up so that you're comfy, your shoulders and your hips are supported by your legs and your arms. You're taking your left leg out to the side, making sure it's sticking to the floor, rocking back and forth. I have my back toes tucked under. I'm sitting all the way back to the heel, coming all the way forward over the wrists, back and forth. You can do this on your forearms. It makes it a little bit more exciting. No, it's not more exciting. Makes the sensations a little bit stronger. Also, where you put your foot is going to change how much stretch you're getting. So farther away is going to be more stretch. Just make sure the main thing is it doesn't slip. Then we're coming up into this kneeling position, turning the toes up to the sky, spreading the arms out straight, exhaling into this kneeling triangle pose. Right arm up to the sky or over the cheek for more stretch. I'm not trying to lean forward here. I'm trying to squeeze my buns, lift the heart, and lean back towards the wall behind me. Keep the heart open, the breath open. Embracing stillness. Eventually coming with the hands forward again, dropping the toes to the floor, and then stepping back to child's pose. Taking a few slow breaths in your child's pose. And then from your child's pose, come to sit. So you could come to sit by lifting the hips up, crossing the ankles, and sitting back, or you can take your legs around the side and set yourself up so that you are, I think I'll face this way, so that your legs are straight out. We're gonna take the right ankle on the left thigh. This is gonna be like a figure 4 stretch. Take the hands back behind you and then bend the left knee. So we're doing like a seated figure 4 position. You'll remember this from lying down. And also we do a standing version of this as well. So this is going to be a deep stretch for your right hip. If your foot's further away, it'll be less stretch. If it's closer in, it'll be more stretch. Give it a few breaths. Keeping the chest up. You can also do this sitting in a chair. So imagine that we're lying down doing this, which we do a lot. And take your legs so that they go to one side. So I have my right ankle on my left thigh. I'm gonna take my legs to the left. Notice I'm gonna move my left foot. I'm gonna move my left foot to the right. I'm gonna let my right foot come down to the floor. I'll do that facing forward. And I might have my sides off, so I'm gonna switch. So don't you switch, but I have my right ankle on my left thigh. I'm gonna move my left thigh to the right so that my right foot can come down on the floor. Then this right hip lifted up a little bit, so I'm just gonna kind of pull my foot in a little bit closer, so I'm kind of sitting on it, and then I'm gonna turn to the right. So I'm taking my elbow around my knee and looking over my right shoulder. Hopefully I didn't lose you on this, because I definitely lost me. So from the side, it looks like this. I could also be taking my upper arm and pressing. So if you feel like you're in a real struggle and you're falling back, do this with your hips elevated on something. Maybe like a bolster or a pillow. And then we'll inhale and switch sides. So we'll inhale, come back to center, unpretzel the legs, and then shake them out a little bit and do your other side. So on this side, we're taking the left ankle over the right thigh. I'm gonna do that over here. We're bending the right thigh, hands come back behind, and this is a great stretch to just hang out in. This is the facing forward version. So left ankle on right thigh. I'm gonna move my right foot over to the left, put my left foot on the floor. I could just clasp the front knee and sit up tall, or I can lean on my left arm, take my right elbow around my left knee and look over the shoulder, or I can go a little further and press my upper arm into my knee and look over the left shoulder. So whatever version feels best for you. Sitting on a pillow will really help as well. Giving yourself a moment to welcome in stillness and a calm breath. And then inhaling to come back to the center. Sit with the soles of the feet together. I like the stretch with the feet further away. Maybe you like it more intense with the feet in. Just go for whatever feels right for you today. And as you enter into the stretch, keep the back straight. Be in a straight back version of this for at least the first section, if not the whole thing. And then when you feel like relaxing a little bit, if it's okay with your back, relax forward. So when you relax forward, your whole back is gonna round. My back stays a little bit straight, so rounding the back is a little bit difficult for me. If you're in this rounded state, keep the core strong. You can stretch your arms forward or keep them underneath you, whatever feels best for you. Take a few breaths. Don't worry about how far down you're going. It's about breathing into the body. and making that pathway back to presence just by remembering the breath. After 5 or 10 breaths or so, come slowly back up to sit. Scoot yourself forward and roll down onto your back. Once you're down on your back, take your arms palms facing up and do some windshield wipers. You can do it with your feet off the floor. Knees can be together or apart. So if you're just trying this for the first time, feet together and knees apart is going to be easier. Knees together is going to make it a little bit harder. If you want to just keep the feet on the floor any distance apart, do that. Come to a knees to chest position. Open your knees pretty wide. Reach through, hold on to the outer feet. So I have my arms on the inside of my legs. I'm holding my outer feet. This is a little bit like a happy baby, which would have the feet up to the sky. This is a slightly different version. I also like the version where, hopefully you can see this in the video, the ankles are crossed, the arms are on the outside, and you're holding on to the top of the feet. Or you could just be hugging your knees to your chest. You can wiggle your legs around if you like. We're going to do one spinal articulation. So you're going to push the feet into the ground, push the lower back into the ground, lift the hips. And when we articulate the spine, we're just trying to lift up very slowly. So imprint the lower back on the floor, use the glutes, tuck the tailbone, lift the hips, then the lower back, then the middle back. You might be able to lift a little bit of your upper back depending on how high you're coming. Really stretch open this front section of the legs. And then when you lower down, take your time, savor the movement. Come down onto your upper back, middle back, lower back, and then the hips. Give your knees a hug up to the chest or whatever feels right to you. Sometimes I like to do a little circle to the right, a little circle to the left. If there's something else you'd like to do, like a twist or soles together, knees apart, do that and make your way towards a little bit of quiet time. When you're arranging to lie down, make sure that you have yourself set up so that you're very comfortable, so that your body is not a distraction and you can just be with your natural breath, not a deeper breath anymore, just your natural breath. And then in the realm of mindfulness where you're not trying to focus on one thing, but you're allowing in everything. So practicing that pathway back to presence, if your mind gets lost in thought, if you are rehearsing a situation that isn't happening right now, remember that you can find your way back just by noticing things that are happening right now. The breath, the sensations, the flow of sensations, there's sounds, there's temperature, there's thoughts, moods, and feelings. Everything is just changing configurations of energy. And I would suggest that you rest this way until you feel fully marinated, which would take probably about 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to leave you here and say namaste to you. I hope that this helps you in some big or small way in your day, and that by giving yourself a little bit of time to be with yourself, you are more ready to be present for others in your life as well. Namaste.